Technologies presents Weld Wednesday with AWS. Brought to you by the American Welding Society. And now your host, Jason Becker.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a very special edition of Weld Wednesdays with AWS, brought to you by the American Welding Society. Tonight, we are kicking off National Welding Month, and joining me is Shanen Aranmor from Weld Like A Girl, all the way from Yuma, Arizona. Shanen, how you doing tonight?
Doing great. Thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me. I'm grateful to be here.
Oh, no, my pleasure. We got to meet at the Weld Summit a couple years ago in person, which was really cool. You were actually the keynote speaker for that event.
I was the closing keynote, and I didn't get out to see you. You had the AWS trailer out there, and you had a lot of customers. But since I was inside, I didn't get to see you in action.
Yeah, we had a ton of students out there. It was the they had Stephanie Hoffman was running the Careers in Welding trailer, and it was it was a really good experience. We got to do a couple podcasts out there at the studio or at the trailer, and then I did a couple inside. I really didn't get to catch much of the show, unfortunately. So I kind of want to go back and check out some of the action.
Yeah, that was the year that Ray Ripple was there, and she had just published her book.
Yes.
The very first children's book on welding. And so got to meet her, got to meet you and Stephanie. It was great.
Yeah, it's always a good time. But I mean, and that's kind of like, what the welding community does for people. It provides them an opportunity, with different events and seminars and stuff like that to actually be able to meet in person. So I think it's great, just the networking aspect of it alone.
Absolutely. I've met people, so many people, either at the Welding Summit, Fab Tech, or even through Instagram, social media. There are some people that I've sort of helped get off the ground. And then there are people that have helped me figure out navigating, how to accomplish certain goals. And so the social media aspect, I think, is also a really helpful way to network and just share ideas, bounce ideas off of people.
Oh, 100%. Now, you started off working in academia, like you were in psychology, you were a professor, and then you kind of, are you still active doing that, or you're like full-time 100% welding now?
No, I'm welding. So in academia, the myth that I believed was that you should become an administrator. That would somehow be like the next great step. And so while I loved teaching so much, and I also was a part-time therapist, I loved that, but I moved to Arizona to become an administrator and found that the $5,000 extra that they paid me, I would have paid them to not do it. I didn't have any contact with students, and those that I did were angry, and faculty were angry, administrators were angry. So I actually, I'd been doing blacksmithing as my own personal stress management for years. And when our instructor told us that he was moving to Colorado, the class was going to go away, I went to the head of the welding department and said, hey, look, I'm a novice blacksmith. I've been taking this class like, I don't know how many semesters. So you're doing the same thing over and over again, but I'm a really good instructor. Could I be your placeholder for next semester until you find the right person? And he looked back and he said, I'll take a chance on you, but you need to take a welding class so you're not missing that vocabulary that the welding students have. And it turned out that the only class that was available was kind of a welding survey class. And I found out that I was decent at most things, but I was really terrible at oxy-fuel welding. So the next semester, even though I didn't have to, I took that. And I almost dropped out. I was thinking like, I'm just not getting it. And I wound up going to a student in the program and said, what advice do you have? And he said, slow down and find your song. And I'm like, this is that smack talk. And you got to remember, I got to give you a grade at the end of the semester, young man. So he said, you got to slow down, just breathe. And so I came into Open Lab a bunch. I won't say his name, but in case he's watching, I will tell you the song was from the Carpenters that I heard him play in the lab. And I was like, you weren't kidding. And so just slowing down was the best piece of advice he gave me. And then I fell in love with it. The next semester, I took 2 more classes, then 2 more classes, and really decided to get into welding when I was sort of pressured into joining Skills USA. I was asked, do you want to be on the fab team? And I said, heck no. I mean, Jason, I've read your bio on LinkedIn, you've got a long history of working with tools and doing all this stuff. And I don't. I learned how to use most of the tools in the program and then School of Hard Knocks. So I was really anxious about joining the team because, you're a team of 3. And what if I let you down? What if we lose because of me and something I don't know how to do? So I said no. And 6 months later, the instructor asked me again, and I said no again. And he said, would you be willing to be the alternate to the alternate? I was like, yeah, that sounds safe. The next day I was on the team. The next day I was the alternate. 2 days later, I was on the team. We won at regionals. We won at state, and we went to nationals. I'm like, so that actually was a fabulous experience for me. While we didn't win at nationals, the amount of work we put into preparing for nationals made me feel really confident. I came back and I was able to work part-time in fab, and then I taught at that school in the welding department. And then my dream, I told the head of the department at that time, I said, if I'm gonna do this, if I'm gonna join the welding community, I want to work for the best dang welding manufacturer in the country. And so everyone has opinions on that, whether they're blue or red, but for me, it was blue. And so I was grateful. I joined the Miller training team. I was a Miller trainer for 6 years.
Oh, wow. Very cool. I had no idea.
Yeah, I was the first woman they hired, and that was kind of exciting and challenging in its own ways. But when I left Miller, I actually had so I had 2 deaths in my family within 13 months. And, one of them wasn't a shock. It was my grandfather, and he was older, but the other one was very, very, just way too young. And I realized that I was supposed to travel for 50% of my time as a Miller trainer. I was Denver and West, Edmonton, Canada, and South. And I was traveling closer to 100%, which meant that I wasn't home to be with those people that I lost. And so it just, the timing was good. And I said, I'm going to do this thing that I dreamed of the first day of welding class, which was to use welding as a tool to empower people. Initially, I was thinking specifically women, but I realized within 2 weeks of starting Weld Like a Girl that boys and men want to learn how to weld too. And it's empowerment for everyone. And I mean, just knowing how to use any tool is empowering, but being able to control fire and build things with your own hands. I mean, you feel like such a badass when you're walking out the door. So we're a welding fab shop, but we focus on empowerment.
Now you do a little bit of everything in your shop because, I mean, you're doing inspection work, you're doing training, you're doing like mentorship. You got a lot going on.
Yeah, we do. It's kind of, but I look at it like that's what keeps me fresh. You and I have talked before about how do you keep yourself in the industry and how do you keep yourself from getting stagnant and stale? And for me, it's just this afternoon, now a colleague, I met him. He's from our town, but I met him at Tulare Farm Show when I was working for Miller, and I taught him how to aluminum TIG weld at the Tulare Farm Show. He's a fabricator in town with his dad. They have a business. And today he called and said, hey, I need to get certified in A5.1. Can you do that? I said, give me a few weeks. I'll buy the book. I'll read it. I'll get familiar with it. I'll talk to people in AWS, and I'll get familiar enough with that code that I feel like I could run a qualification test for you. So, it's just a little bit of everything. I think helps me specifically to be on top of my game. Anytime someone asks me to build something I've never built before, I'm okay, I can do this. And then I do a little homework. I make some phone calls or, if I can't figure something out, I've got some people on speed dial. But I love it. And I have kids in here all the time and they're doing real life projects, and everything that we do, I try to make it big, like physically large, so that they can't help but to drive past that sculpture or that welcome sign or whatever it is that we've done for the city or for the state. And it's important, Jason. You and I have talked about too, about like, how do we become role models or mentors for our youth? And I think the way that I can do that is provide them an opportunity to participate in things that, even if they want to make bad choices, they have to drive past that thing. And when they drive past it, they go, oh, I'm better than this. I don't have to make bad decisions. I was inside of that one day, and I can do cool things again. I think you just need to give them opportunities to be successful.
That's a really cool perspective to be able to have something that they can see of, like, a time in their life where struggling and pushing through to get something done, and they were able to do it. And, they may be falling back on hard times, and then they can kind of see that, and it becomes an inspiration to do better. Like you were saying, like, I'm better than this. And, it just keeps giving them the momentum to push forward.
Absolutely. In welding, we all pretend like we're like tough all the time. Like, you're invincible. But I'm going to tell you, I had a phone call of one of the young men that was inside of a sculpture that we built from the ground up. They had to do math to figure out how much material that the city of Yuma was going to need to purchase. And he called me one day and he said, "Hey, miss, that sculpture we made?" And I'm thinking, the one that's 15 feet long, 9.5 feet tall, 6.5 feet deep, and filled with 12 tons of rock. Yeah, I might remember that. Like, of course I remember that, right? He said, that sculpture, I was driving someplace the other day I shouldn't have been, and I saw our sculpture, and I turned around. And I was like, trying not to be like, yeah. But I said, okay, this is what I need you to do. Every time you get a dumb idea like that, I want you to go take your shoes off, sit down in front of that, meditate, breathe, whatever you need to do, ground yourself, center yourself. But remember that not only were you inside of that, you were a part of trying to figure out the geometry of it. We made a water tower as part of it that was round, circumferences, things like that, the things that you would never, ever want to do, but you did them. Remember all the things that you struggled with, and you don't have to make those bad choices. So far, so good. I haven't heard anything bad. So
that's a plus.
Fingers crossed.
That's the one thing I love about teaching welding, is because the students will tell you, I'm bad at math, or I'm bad at this, or I'm bad at that. And then you don't tell them that they're actually doing math, and you get them out there, and they're figuring out diameter and circumferences, and they're coming up with all these different interesting ways to use the tools, or create the part that's actually needed. And they come up with some really cool stuff. And they're using math the whole time, and they have no idea.
They don't. And I do find it interesting and kind of ironic. I'm sure that my geometry teacher from 9th grade is rolling over in his grave right now laughing, because I was that kid with my hand on my hip. I'm never going to use this again. Yeah, Pythagorean theorem and circumferences on a daily, and then trigonometry just all the time. I mean, daily. Yeah. So I'm eating my words, but it's okay, because it's applied, and it's not as painful as sitting just in a class. Learning how to apply math and physics is fascinating, and I wish I had that perspective when I was younger, because I probably would have enjoyed those classes a lot better.
I think you just got to find a way. You got to find relevancy. That's why, like, when I sit down with my kids and I help tutor them with their math and stuff, I try to make it relevant to them. But they don't have a whole lot of real world experience to make it relative. So I'm even looking at some of my son's algebra, and I'm like, I'm 41 and I've never used this. Like, this is, right? We're going to glaze past this, but you need to focus on the shapes and the measurements and, fractions. Like, that's all good stuff. Pythagorean theorem, you're going to use that at some point in your life.
Yes, you will. And a squared, like X and Y, you might be in the supermarket. You have to cook rice for 55 people at Miller. We had a potluck, and they're like, "Oh, you're from Arizona, you prepare the rice." And I'm in the store with the boxes of rice. I'm trying to, well, this one makes 9 servings, and this one makes this many servings. And I was like, oh my God, this is algebra. I have to figure out how many boxes I need. So you will use it on weekly, if not daily, especially in welding.
For sure.
One of the things though I thought was cool, I was working with a charter high school that was associated with the juvenile courts, and their English teacher was so cool. She had them do vocabulary and write essays about what they did in welding. So she would each week get a list of either tools or terms or whatever that we did. And that way she knew. So she was actually learning some welding vocabulary as well. But the students got to use what they learned in welding in the morning for those few hours. Then they got back to school and they were able to, do some of those reading and writing skills, but it was less painful for them because it was relevant to their world right now.
Oh, that's okay. No, that's really cool that you guys were able to collaborate on that.
Yeah, the math teacher was pretty cool about that too. We talked a lot about tape measures. I just saw something pop up in the feed, and someone was talking about tape measures in the classroom. And I don't care if it's a college class I'm teaching or a class starting off with young people in middle school and high school. We always talk about a tape measure, and we divide everything into 8, and we just talk about pizza. Just break it down into easy pieces, I suppose you could say. And for me, what I like to do is start off with assuming that people don't know about a tape measure, and just say, like, I'm not trying to insult your intelligence. I'm just going to tell you this is how I had to learn it. I have a lot of background in science, and so we did everything in metric, which is, of course, significantly easier than the SAE system. So I had to, like, first time that the instructor in the welding program asked me for 5/64ths. I looked at him like he was absolutely insane. And I'm like, 64 divided by 2 is 32. Okay. And I like had to break down, like, how big is 5/64ths? Because that's an insanely small number. And so I didn't really understand that. So I had to learn how to read a tape measure in a different way. So now I'm like, I get your struggle. So I break it down, and I'm like, for what we're going to do, more than a 16th is not going to be necessary. If you're going to go into machining, that's a different story. But for us, we're going to stick to probably eighths and maybe 16ths, but that's as far down as we have to go for now. And I think once you break it down and everyone gains that level of confidence, then it's never an issue. I know that any of my interns or any of my students right now, they can tell me what 5/8 is without even looking. They can just know. And so you just got to practice it.
Yeah,
and make a lot of mistakes.
Yeah, no, definitely make a lot of mistakes.
I always
try to get everything within like a 16th. Legos work really good for teaching fractions. Just because you got every little increment of it. You can work with Legos, and then they're having fun, especially because you train like young welders, like extremely young welders. What's the youngest you've ever taught?
I have taught as old as 5 years old, and so far as young as 88.
88.
There have been about five-year-olds, not all at once. But I do, I'll have a group of 22 second graders. They're going to be coming back. I had a group of 22 second graders from a local charter high school around the corner from us. They walked over here. And Mike Krupnicki, president of AWS, was here. He had to fly into Phoenix for a meeting. And so he drove over to Yuma a few hours and watched this happen. And he was like, I just can't even believe this. He's like, I knew what you were doing, but I didn't really get it until I saw these 7 and 8 year olds get so excited. And we had a TV reporter, and all the kids wanted to rush up and tell them about the sparks. And it was cool. But 5 years old is the youngest. And it's getting more possible now because some of the companies, the PPE companies, are actually responding to our requests. And, we've been asking for years, like, we need more women's stuff. We need smaller stuff. And so as far as little kids, the best solution that I have, I'm sure we're not supposed to plug anybody, but I'm going to say it because people ask me all the time, is Blue Demon makes a line of gloves called Little Demons. Yep. And they are for children, and they have extra small gloves, and 5-year-olds fit. It's crazy.
I've actually had to buy some of their gloves for some of the female students that have come through my class because they have such small hands that even the Tillman smalls are still too big. So I had to get like the
man small.
Yeah. I had to get the little ones from Blue Demon.
Yep. Unisex is code for man size. And I'm small. I mean, my shoulders are small. My hands are small. I mean, I'm not small for a woman, but I'm definitely not going to be a man's small or medium. So, then we look at other companies for PPE, like for jackets and stuff. And Black Stallion does make women's extra small. The good news for us at Weld Like a Girl, because we have a lot of male students in here, is that line of PPE is not any different color. It's still dark blue and black. And so it's not like, dudes that are smaller have to wear a hot pink jacket or anything. Everything looks pretty much the same. And so I just organize them in size order, and I just hand people jackets that fit them. So it works out pretty well.
Yeah. There was a lady that she runs a program called the Safety Rack, and it's specifically designed for like females in construction. So they're not wearing, because a lot of that PPE, it can get big and bulky and cumbersome. And, if things don't fit, dangerous. I mean, that cuts down on your efficiency and all that.
Oh, it's also dangerous. I've worn welding jackets that are so wide. They're a man small, but they're like short and wide that if I was next to rotational equipment, I could have gotten sucked in because there's just way too much material. So, and I look at like harnesses when I'm doing an inspection job and I have to be up in a bucket truck. Of course, I've got to be in a harness. Well, most of those harnesses are going to be just automatically geared to someone your size, much taller with much broader shoulders than me. And so I'll be taking the harness and, all the way down. And now there are companies that are starting to provide more variety in their PPE. And it's not just for smaller people. I mean, it's just, people are shaped differently. And I think we've been doing this cookie cutter thing for long enough. And we need to step up our game, I think, as an industry.
Oh, for sure. Now, what's been your motivation behind, because like you're not only are you involved with Weld Like a Girl, which is your own program, but you're also involved with like AWS meetings. You're involved with some of the seminars that are going on. You're also still heavily actively involved with Skills USA. Like, what's your motivation to keep, doing what you're doing?
Well, I look at it this way. When I trained for Skills to be on the FAB team, and our team of 3, we would meet every single day for the 2 months before we left for, at that time it was Kansas City. And we worked really hard. And when I came back from that trip, even though we didn't stand on the podium, a student asked me, they were struggling with a machine, and they said, "Hey, Shanen, can you fix this?" And I listened hard and I went, I can fix that. I know exactly what's wrong. So I went over and I fixed it. And then I thought, okay, that sense of accomplishment was really super important for me. And so I want to be able to share that with people. I want people to be able to recognize that they are capable. We always say, to discover your inner badass, it's like, I want people to know that they can do things that they never thought that they could do. So part of it is the piece of like just helping people understand how awesome they are. The other thing is when I see people struggle, I know exactly what they went through. I mean, I almost dropped out of that welding class because I was terrible. And then I just kept practicing. And one day it just hit. And I was like, oh my gosh, I got it. And I ran over to the instructor and I showed him, look. And from that day forward, he called me welder. And I was like, all right, I get you. I have to live up to that. And so I just love it when people have that light bulb go on over their heads. The other thing is for stuff like Skills, man, I'll tell you what, I didn't podium that year that I competed, but I have been hanging medals since 2012 every single summer. And oh man, that's so rewarding. You hear people's stories and how hard they work to get where they're at. And I mean, we've had, I'm the tech chair for welding sculpture. And so we do an interview. It's only a 5-minute interview, but they provide a profile, a book basically of how they've created their sculpture. And some of those students go through so much detail, and they've struggled with all kinds of things, veterans and people who've gone through domestic violence situations and just all different stories. And to be able to see people use something as useful and as constructive as welding to get themselves out of some really dark places, it's just, I don't know, it makes me feel awesome that I can be a part of this community.
Yeah, it's awesome empowering others. I like one of the things I had to take ROTC. Well, I didn't have to take ROTC, but I took ROTC when I was in high school. And one of the coolest things was Jem Marie was this lady who was our instructor, and she was a student. She was like I think a senior, and I was probably a sophomore at the time. And she always made us do push-ups when we said, I can't.
Yes.
So I hate the words I can't. No, because and my mom, she used to tell me like can't never could, which never really made sense when I was growing up, but it makes sense now. But you can't limit yourself. So to be able to share your experiences, share your intellect, everything that you can with other people and empower them to do things that they could never do. It's really, really cool.
It is. It's really cool. And the other thing is I can tell people, you don't have to make that particular mistake because I've already made that one. So you need to make your own. So, mistakes are your biggest teacher. So if I can prevent someone from making a mistake that I already know what's going to happen at the end of that, sometimes you have to let people make their own mistakes. Yeah. But if it's an easy one and I'm like, I already made that one, make your own, choose another one. And that way, that also normalizes them because people expect that they're going to be perfect when they learn something the very first day.
Yep.
Like, I don't know where we got that from, but I tell people, I teach classes for the public. And so maybe it's a 2-hour or 6-hour one and done kind of class. And they're like, oh man, this is terrible. And I said, people go to school for 9 months to 4 years to learn this. You've had probably 25 minutes of instruction, 45 minutes of practice, and then you were just have at it, you were making something. As far as I'm concerned, the fact that that's staying together is pretty rad.
Yeah. I've had some students come through Underground Metalworks, and we'll go from one process to the next, and they're like, well, I haven't perfected this one yet. You're really never going to perfect that. I've been at this for 26 years. I still haven't perfected it, but I always, show them. I like to save their first piece. And I picked this up when I was teaching, technical college or at the technical school. Save the first piece. Let them go in there and make a weld. And then at the end of the week, the end of the term, the end of the program, just say, hey, look how far you've come. Here's what you're doing now. Here's what you started off with. Like, do you see that progression? Do you see how much knowledge and you've gained throughout this entire process? And when they can see that, because they never remember how bad they were when they first started. But if you're naturally good at everything, you're going to live a boring life. It's okay to suck at things. Like I'm doing blacksmith right now. I've been at it for a couple of years. I still suck at it. I'm still making the same dang leaves, but I'm getting better every single time. And that's the goal. That's the objective, is to get better every single time that you do it.
Exactly. It's funny that you said that, saving those initial pieces. For me, I come from a mindset of I don't like to waste. Part of my life, I was raised by my grandparents, and they were Depression era folks, and so I just don't throw things like I wouldn't. You see in the recycle bin in some schools, one plate with one weld down the center, and it hits the recycle bin or the trash. I'm like, homie, don't play that. I can't do it. So I saved all of my pieces from my welding degree. They were in this giant Rubbermaid tote. I mean, I had to put my feet up against the wall to push it to get it. I mean, it was, I don't know how many hundreds of pounds, right? Stick class, all that, heavy plate, So I was like, what am I going to do with this? And so at some point, the person that's now my husband, I said, do you want to take a welding class to see what I do? And so he said, sure. So he took a welding sculpture class and asked me to take it with him. And I thought, perfect. That's what I'm going to do with all of these plates that are terrible up to good. And so I cut them, all the heavy ones I cut on a diagonal with oxyacetylene. And then the thinner ones I cut on a diagonal with plasma. And then I made a sculpture. It starts off really heavy at the bottom, and it's a spiral, and it comes up, and it's called Metamorphosis. And by the time I got to the top, the thin TIG plates, they were pretty dang good. And then the aluminum, of course, metallurgically can't weld to steel. So then I suspended them on chains, and so it's a wind chime. And so really cool. I feel you. I think that, we have to see, the really bad welds are in the ground because they're a part of the base, but they're pretty awful on the bottom, and that's okay. I want to see that. I want to know, I can pass these qualification tests, but I had to start somewhere. And you can be a really good welder, but most likely you didn't just pick up the torch and just be awesome at it. And if you were, kudos to you, but that's the exception, not the rule. Yeah,
I've trained students for quite a while now, and I've only ever had one student that I could literally show him how to do something, and he could walk up right behind me and replicate it. And it was amazing. I was like, how long have you been welding? He's like, Mr. B, you seen me 3 weeks ago start with everybody else. That's how long I've been welding. And I'm like, no, you're messing with me. You welded before this. He's like, never seen any of this equipment, never touched any of this stuff, always thought it was cool, but he just had a knack. But I've never seen anyone like that.
Did you look for the cable in the back of his head, or
maybe Neuralink? But yeah. Neuralink wasn't around. That was the first class I taught back in, I think it was 2014, late 2014. Is when I guess it would have been early 2014, somewhere around in there. But yeah, I couldn't believe it. I was like, man, everything he touches, I'd show him one process, he'd practice for a day, and he'd be ready to test out the next day. Once he figured out how to do a structural plate test, he was ready to test out within 2 days of learning the process. And he was just but he was a perfectionist with everything that he does. Now he's a machinist, so that makes sense.
Perfect fit. Whenever someone's got that very, very high on the perfectionism scale, I'm like, perhaps you should consider machining.
Yeah, exactly.
We have just as much of a shortage of machinists as we do welders, and they're both super important. And not everybody has the patience to be a machinist.
Yeah.
I made it through my machine tool class, but I learned that I am not a machinist.
That's the one other area that I would like to get proficient in is machining, because if you know welding and machining, and you've got a little bit of engineering, intuition, you're unstoppable.
You can make anything. So it's funny you mentioned that. So one of the other things besides skills that I do is Project MFG, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but Project MFG it's funded by the Department of Defense, and they're trying to elevate the skilled trades. Really make it so that the skilled trades are not this dingy, dirty thing. This is this is like very high level, we've had competitions that are involved in maritime. So we've had Navy admirals be one of our judges last year. Let me step back for a second. So they have machining, welding, and then additive manufacturing. That's kind of the focus that they've got right now. And the advanced manufacturing competition, the national level that I get to be the judge for, which I'm so grateful for. It's machining and welding. So it's a team of 3 or 4. It's $100,000 prize. $50,000 goes to the school, and $50,000 goes to that team of 3 or 4 to spend however they want. It doesn't have to be used for school.
Oh, that's awesome.
Think about that. Like, that's real money. I mean, wow, right? And so the teams decide they want to be a team of 3 or a team of 4. Now, obviously, you get more money if you're a team of 3 if you win. But if you're the welder and the programmer and the program crashes, now you're taken out of the welding booth. You have to clock out of welding and you have to clock into machining. But the reason why I bring that up is that is one of the ways where I have grown. I've seen so much of machining as a result of I think it's been 3 years with Project MFG. I'm usually the lead welding judge, but I get to watch CNC machining. Now, we had to do manual stuff in my class, but there is a world out there that, man, I'm like, this is interesting. They can, between welders and machinists, we can make anything.
Yeah.
And then you throw the 3D printing aspect in, and especially if you're 3D printing stainless steel or something, that's next level crazy. You can make literally anything.
Yeah, they're doing some really, really cool stuff with additive manufacturing now. It's insane. Like, the possibilities are endless. You don't have to do castings anymore, and it's really cool. The fact that they can just build something and they're just using filament and filler wire, and it's essentially MIG welding. 3D printing with MIG. Yep,
I know, it's insane. I'm excited about that. I'm a little nervous about it. Just, the CWI comes out and I'm like, can we maybe not make bridges like that for like a long time? Just like, let's do tons and tons of testing.
Well, they built one in Amsterdam.
They did.
Like a personnel. Yeah, it's like for people.
Yeah, it's a footbridge.
Yeah, but they had a robot start on either side of the, the river or whatever, and they just welded themselves into the center, and it lined up perfect.
I know.
It looks fantastic.
Cool. Yeah, I haven't seen it yet in person, but that's on my increasingly growing longer bucket list to ride a bicycle across that little bridge.
Yeah, that'd be kind of neat to see it. I'd like to see it in person.
Mm-hmm.
Now
it'd be kind of interesting to ride like a 3D printed bicycle across it, or a welded titanium bike.
Yeah. Now that would be kind of cool. Now the theme of this year's National Welding Month is increasing your impact. So we've talked about some of the ways you can increase your impact through mentoring and stuff like that, but how do you go about increasing your impact or inspiring others to increase their impact? Because, if you think about it, we keep passing this information off to others, and hopefully they're going to pass it off to others. So what are some of the ways that you continue to increase your impact?
So I mentioned the second graders that come around at least once a year, but what I do is I have a couple of interns. 2 of them have been with me for several years. And then I have an intern. He started off as a junior intern when he was 11, and he is almost 15 now. He's now a full-time, full-fledged intern. He's still in high school. But so I have those students that are proficient in the shop. In order to become an intern, they know how to use every machine in the shop, set it up safely, operate it, and completely shut it down and make it, be safe. But then they are now able to help when we have new people come in. So it's like but you've trained people to use things safely, that now there's more than one of you in the room, essentially, because they know what they're doing. But more importantly than that, when those second graders come in, the second graders, the first time it happened, again, Jason, we're tough guys in welding, but man, this was a minute. I stepped back. I was like, this is what I quit my big girl job for. So I have I work with some charter high school students, and they get to come to my shop for 3 hours in the mornings before they go back to school for math and English. And a lot of them have a history of, some experience with juvenile courts, or maybe they've got a learning disability or something. There's a reason that they're in a smaller school, a charter school environment. Maybe it's just simply that they want less stimuli in the classroom, just fewer people. But, sometimes there's smack talk in the welding shop amongst them about like all the hoodlum things that they've done. Well, when you empower those students, those high school students, to then teach the second graders that come in, I'm like, and I didn't tell them the first time, I said nothing. And they all walked in and I said, okay, I want the extra small jackets there. And I want the extra small gloves at that booth. And I went, and I went around and I said, this is what I want at each station. They said, Miss, what's going on? I said, we got about 20 minutes before the second graders come in. And they said, what? I said, you two are going to be over here. You two are going to be over here. And I had them teach. And these big, like they call themselves thugs. They're big dudes. And I had the biggest dudes work with the littlest kids, and they're crouched down and they're talking to the kids. And I was ready. I had my helmet on. I had my gear. I was ready. To jump in and rescue them. And I looked around the room and I thought, oh my gosh, I don't have to rescue anybody. They are doing exactly what needs to happen. They are now empowering littler kids. They are empowering. They're empowering themselves by teaching because they're reinforcing what they're doing, but they are the ones that are all excited about it. And the little kids are looking at them like, whoa, you're like demigods. So each booth had, 2 kids at a time, two second graders at a time. And then we took all of the pieces that they welded, put them all together. The teacher got to put the last piece on. I turn around, I'm missing some of the kids. And I said, where the heck are they? They were outside with my high school students. The high school students had a stick electrode in their hand, and they were talking about the difference between stick and MIG, because we did MIG that day. And they were talking about how the electrode burns up. And these little kids are sitting there cross-legged looking up with their helmets up. And my high school kids were just, it was mesmerizing. I couldn't even believe that they were able to do that and that they wanted to do that. And the second graders were listening. So I feel like, that paying it forward thing is really working. I don't know, it's crazy. I get excited about it every time it happens. But the other things that we do, I've never had to refuse if a school has asked me to come in. If I'm a guest speaker, unless they give me only 5 minutes, I'll bring like a little, just a wire welding machine. I'll bring a MIG machine. I'll bring a steel mix. I'll bring a fold up table that I've got. Welding blanket in case I happen to be like in the school's library, local 6th grade school. But like I have stuff, and then we'll have little pieces we'll shear out ahead of time. So every kid that wants to come through puts on PPE and they weld a little weld, and then we put everything together and they just kind of build on, and then the teacher gets to keep that. And I feel like that's really important to go out in the schools and do it, because not everybody can afford or even has ever heard of some of the programs that we offer. And so to bring it to them is really important. And I've driven almost an hour away to a tiny little school that's very, very rural out here. And their high school is small. And I had the little table with 3 sides on it, and it blocks all of the arcs. And we were in their gym, and every student that wanted to weld got an opportunity to weld. And if you don't know what something is, how do you know if you want to do it? You've got to get that in their hands.
Yeah, I do volunteer work with a group called the Future Builders of America. And I guess they have chapters all over the place. And it's like young high school kids, probably 9th, 10th grade. And they bring them out for a week and they just show them all about the skilled trade. So that one year, this welding instructor dropped out, and I got called by my local AWS section, and they were like, hey, can you fill in? You're a welding teacher. So I was like, yeah, I could do that. And I went to the plasma cutter and I ripped up a bunch of Eagles. And, we went out there and same thing, welding, folding table, little wire welder, I think a small bottle and 75-25. And we went out there it was like Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And they just rotated in like groups of 10. Everybody got to weld. Everybody got to build an Eagle. But it was like just exposing them to the different facets of the skilled trades. They got to do masonry. They did a little bit of carpentry. They did some landscaping, hardscaping, even, how to put in a swimming pool. We did all kinds of cool stuff. And every year they try to leave, because they do it at the, what's that group? The Future Farm, the FFA. They got like a big campground out here. And they put something out there every year that's like a permanent structure. So one year they built a couple of sheds. One year they did like a whole dumpster section, concrete with the big swing gates and everything like that. It was really cool to be able to see these young men and women that have never touched a hand tool a day in their life. And, unless they're moving a screwdriver in the junk drawer or something like that, to go out there and actually put on a tool belt and start pulling measurements and, doing all this stuff. It's really cool to see, how it can spark their creativity and get them involved and get them actively engaged in learning something new that's kind of outside of their comfort zone.
Absolutely. And you know as well as I do that when you build something with your own hands, there is a sense of pride and accomplishment that you don't get. Like when I was an administrator, I didn't get that. You're moving papers from one side of the desk to the other. But when you build something with your hands, even if it's not the most perfect thing, if you practice, you're going to get better. But a lot of students now, they just don't have any opportunities to build. Everything is in front of your face on a either on a device or we're just so electronically connected that we're disconnected from physical building. And I feel like anytime I've given students or any human being an opportunity to build, they usually are like, whoa, that's amazing. I didn't even know that I could. And so, I feel like that kind of camp that you're talking about, first of all, we need that for grownups because I'd like to learn how to do masonry. I mean, personally, I've taken automotive and I've taken electricity, basic electricity, but like masonry, that'd be pretty cool. But like we need to have like an adult camp that we can maybe share skills or something. But I feel like the more the better you're going to be at any job. I mean, maybe you don't choose to be a welder or a machinist, but you're better educated about how things work and how things fit. You're definitely going to be a better engineer if you know how to weld first.
Oh yeah.
Like hands down better. I know when I read a print, I'm like, this guy doesn't know how to weld. It's physically symbols. Impossible.
He's copying.
Yes, exactly. Yes. I'm like, all right. So when I was prepping for skills that year that we were competing at nationals, practiced in different blueprints. And I walked up to the instructor and I was like, man, I have been wrecking my brain. And I held it out and he goes, can't do that, can you? I said, no. He goes, what that engineer told you to do was close the refrigerator door and grab yourself a Coke. I said, that is exactly it. The gusset inside of the pipe, that's not going to happen. And so I find it interesting, like the more people can be building, maybe they're redoing their bathroom, whatever, but like building, getting tools in their hands and becoming empowered and knowledgeable, the better off you're going to be. And I think, we treat each other better when we understand what someone has to do, how hard something is to build. I feel like when people leave my class, maybe they only had a 4-hour class, they walk out, they go, oh, wow, now I understand why welding costs so much when you want something custom fabricated.
Yeah.
Even if they just get that appreciation for someone else's hard work, I think that's something really important.
They gain a whole new appreciation for it. They're like, man, it's a lot harder than it looks.
Absolutely. And then, one of the other things that that's close to my heart is I love working with veterans. And so I find that when veterans have an opportunity to learn something that they've never learned, maybe they didn't do any welding in the military, maybe that wasn't their MOS, give them an opportunity, even if they're like, let's say they're retired and they're not looking for another career, but you've given them a world of opportunity to explore. Or maybe they are looking for another career. And so they're trying to figure out, like, what do I want to do for my second half of my life? Because they joined when they're 18. So they're not even 40 years old yet. They're able to have a whole nother career. And so just, being able to introduce things. I'm trying to get a CNC plasma, particularly, for a lot of reasons, but CNC plasma for me is going to be really offering veterans workshops so that they have a tangible skill that when someone hires them, they're like, look, I can at least operate this machine. You can teach me the rest of what's in your shop.
Yeah, that'd be a really good one to start with. And there's like a lot of different grants and scholarships and programs. And you get veterans have a ton of funding for whether it's vocational rehab, post 9/11 GI Bill. There's all kinds of different avenues of funding. So if you had that in your area, you could definitely launch a lot more people, into that pathway. And that could break off into getting them into welding.
Absolutely. We have a program called Vet Art that we're going to become a part of, because I started off in blacksmithing and last year recently acquired a power hammer. So I have Thor's hammer smashing down. And so I know it's been underutilized, but we're learning. This is a very big, dangerous tool. So you don't just you don't just not read the directions and just try to figure it out. That's one of those that you do some homework. But anyway, I think that would be an opportunity for vet art types of programs to really be able to take blacksmithing to the next level.
No, that's really cool. We do. I'm part of the Florida Artist Blacksmith Association, so we get to, and it's like a free thing that people get to come out and do. And I mean, they ask you eventually, if you come out to 3 or 4 meetings, like, hey, just sign up to become a member. I think it's like $30 for the year, and it covers the cost of material and coal and stuff like that. But it's really cool. And a lot of us that are doing it, they're out there. We're veterans. My buddy, he's the one that got me into it. He's a veteran, and he builds some really cool stuff. But I think that'd be really, what you're doing out there, that's awesome to be able to empower veterans to get them out there, because a lot of that, like, that's kind of what welding's done for me. It's been very therapeutic because, like, once you flip your hood down or once you light that forge and pick up that hammer, like, everything else goes away. So you can just focus on the work that's in front of you. And it's very empowering to give that outlet to somebody.
Absolutely. I had the opportunity to work with, not a veteran, but I had an opportunity to work with one-on-one every week for 2 years with a Special Olympian. And when the hood went down for him, he was the happiest person I think I've ever seen. I think he loved to weld as much, if not more than I do. And that's a lot. So he would just be smiling. And it didn't even matter what he was making. He was just, the hood going down, that meditative, it was like connecting to his heart, and it was beautiful to watch. And he and his family moved away, and my interns and I were heartbroken. We're like, no, you can't leave us, because he just, he really embodied what it is to, I don't know, just to find that peaceful place under the hood.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a lot of people that volunteer with your organization?
So that's a really cool thing that's been happening. This is awesome. I have a retired welder. She was a Boilermaker and pipe welder, and she built ships for Lockheed for her career, and then transferred over to TIG welding solar plants, solar fields. And so she's been out of the industry for about 7 years, I think, and through common friends through the art scene, which is a weird thing for me, but that's just one of the things that happens when you know how to weld. So baby steps, I'm getting there. Anyway, so through the art scene, we got connected, and she's been amazing. And she's got some cool stories that our interns and our volunteers, they listen, and she's this tiny little person, and she's been in these crazy places. And so that's a perspective that I love. And I love brainstorming with her. And sometimes, I'll ask her a question. I'm like, how would you do this orange peel? She's like, never had to fit it up. I'm not a fitter. I'm a welder. I'm like, that's interesting for me too, because like you said before, people think that they're going to be everything. They're going to know everything about welding. And even this person who is a very, very talented welder never had to do the fit up. She didn't have to do the measurements for orange peels and stuff because that wasn't her role. So that kind of taught me too, that it's okay if I can't figure everything out. I have resources. I can ask and get help. But I like when the volunteers come in. I've got some volunteers. There's one guy, Big George. He's not a welder, but he wants to learn how to weld. He's in his 80s. He is a veteran. He used to fix aircraft in the Marine Corps. And then he worked for Parks and Rec and retired out of that in our town. And he's super handy. So he started coming by and said, hey, do you need help fixing things? And so I said, sure do. And so he started tinkering around, fixing stuff. And he said, hey, I think I'd like to learn how to weld. So here he is in his 80s, becoming a student of welding, working with high school students. And he's teaching them, you're never too old to learn. And I let them show him some things, and then he'll show them how to wire a lamp. And so the volunteer piece has been amazing. And I'm so grateful. I never could have asked for, I didn't even know to ask for that. The universe just kind of said, hey, these people are cool and they're out there. And I get emailed maybe every couple of months, a person who used to be a welder full time, or they were a fabricator, fitter, or whatever. And so that's, maybe they're only here for a few months out of the year because we do have a winter visitor population, but they're invaluable to us because they offer a perspective that, you and I couldn't potentially, maybe we've never done that type of work before.
Yeah, especially with like the older generation. They've got, it may not be pertaining to welding, but they've got so much life experience to offer. It's
like so much.
Yeah, it's invaluable.
Yes. I tell the students all the time, especially when they're kind of like, maybe kind of complaining about school. And I was like, you know what you need to do? You need to find some old people that are missing a finger, and you need to find out what happened. And they're like, what? And I'm like, no, seriously, find someone who's been injured, find out what they did. The first thing out of their mouth was, I should have. Looking back now, 5 minutes later, if I had not taken the guard off, or if I had taken my ring off, or whatever it was, and I was like, so that piece that I told you before about these are mistakes that I've made so you don't have to make, let's talk to that older generation, because they were a school of hard knocks big time. They didn't have all the PPE that we have. They didn't even know some of it, and a lot of it is, hearing protection. It just wasn't used. It wasn't important, and I'm not going to be that person. I don't want to be in my 80s, yelling and trying to figure out what people are saying. So I'm like, talk to that older generation, learn as much as you can, find out the cool tools that they use, figure out what those weird things are in the boxes at garage sales, bring them in. We'll ask Big George, we'll ask Scrapper Mike, we'll ask all these people, what are these? What are they for? And then ask them about, what's the coolest thing they've ever built or fixed? How cool is that?
Yeah. Have you ever done any work with the Boy Scouts? Because they've got the welding merit badge.
Yes, I have. When I was at Miller, I ran the Boy Scout merit badge several times, but in my shop, we've done it a bunch. But I don't know how you feel about this, Jason, but my husband and I are the assistant scout masters for the first girls troop of Scouts BSA.
Oh, that's
I know some people are really all about girls being there, and some people are really not about it. It doesn't matter. It's already happened. The dam is already broken. So I figured, you know what?
Might as well.
I'm going to help. And so we've done the metalworking and the welding merit badge here, and the boys troops were also invited, and it's been so cool. I love it. I don't ever want to use the same project again. I want them to have their own experience. So for me, I look at the Scouts rules and I'm like, you need a lap joint, you need this, you need this. So I'll come up with a project where they have to get those pieces all in, but it's not the boring, you don't want to take that home. Let's build a birdhouse. Let's build whatever, make something fun. So yeah, I do. I love that. I know whenever people in welding get together, we're always like, oh, let's have a merit badge, because it's fun to see them. And even really little kids doing that. I think it's amazing. And you never know, you might inspire that kid.
No, that's the whole thing behind it. Like, that's my next step that, now that we have underground metalwork set up, is my business partner and I, that was kind of our plan going forward. Once we get everything set up and established, we want to do a veterans night, like maybe the first Friday or the second Friday of every month, have veterans come in completely free of charge. Just sign the waiver so we don't get sued. Not that they would,
right.
But, you got a liability, we live in a litigious society, but have a veterans night, but also sign up for the BSA merit badge. Because that was something I was trying to do when I was at the school, and for some reason we just could not get that off the ground. But I'm pretty close to a Popka where their district headquarters is, so I can just pop on over one day and be like, hey, give me the form, tell me who I got to hand it into, because like I was actively involved, when I was growing up in Scouts. Funny story, like all of my Scout leaders, Scout masters, all that stuff, they were all females. They were all the other kids' moms. They were all really involved with Scouts. So like that's something I want to do to continue to pay it forward. Like I love opportunities to volunteer. And I mean, like, that's probably one of the biggest ways you can increase your impact is to volunteer your time, go out there, get involved with your local AWS section, teach the Scouts how to weld, work with the Future Builders of America, like all these different organizations. They're begging for people to come out and show them these skill sets. And welding is a skill that we absolutely need. And just because you learn welding, like you'd mentioned earlier, it doesn't mean you have to be a welder when you grow up. You can get into inspection, you can get into engineering, you can get into sales, equipment repair, like all these different things. Welding is like a really cool, unique industry where once you learn the fundamentals and the basics and just enough to be dangerous, you can launch yourself down a completely unrelated yet still related within the industry pathway. And that's the cool thing about welding. I mean, think about how many people do you think you've trained over the past several years that you've been running your organization? Well, including when you were in the military.
Thousands. Yeah. AWS asked me that one time because I'm on a few national committees, and they they asked, and I gave a rough estimate. I can't remember. It's several thousand. I don't even remember now, but because at Miller, it was, a different city. I had 9 sites I was responsible for. And then you think about like merit badges and then the free Veterans Day class that we do, and, just all of that stuff. And then all of the kids in outreach programs, when we go out to the schools and they've learned how to weld, even if it's just that 1 or 2 beads, it's just, started that little spark. And I 100% agree with what you just said about, once you've learned, volunteer. I've had people say, oh, no, I couldn't volunteer for you because I don't know enough. I said, don't worry about it. It's okay if you don't know how to operate the equipment. I can show you how to do that. Your heart will come through. Your volunteer heart, like that's what we need. We need people who give a rip. We need people who want to help the future, impacting the future, changing the future by showing that you care. I mean, what if you helping, volunteering at some merit badge, maybe not you specifically because you would be the welding instructor, but maybe somebody that says, hey, Jason, I don't know if I'm good enough to volunteer. You're like, man, come on in. Maybe they help a kid feel valued. Maybe that's enough. I think sometimes we're so critical of ourselves, like, oh, I don't know enough about this. Maybe I can't volunteer. Yeah, you can. Find it. There are those of us out here that we're like, yeah, bring on the volunteers because you have knowledge and we want to share it, but also you have heart, and kids need to see it. Adults do too, but I feel like we really need to demonstrate to children that they matter.
Yeah, I mean, adults need to see it just as much, because especially like the introverted ones, because that was me. When I got asked to, because I was attending a lot of the AWS meetings, and the volunteers of those meetings asked me to volunteer. They're like, hey, we see you around here quite a bit. We'd like to, offer you an invitation to kind of join the committee and get a little bit more involved. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I know enough about this welding stuff to be, up there on the pedestal with you guys. And they're like, no. This is even playing field here. Wherever you're lacking, we're going to build you up to that next level so that you can then pass that on to the next generation. And had it not been for other volunteers, I don't think I would be where I am today within this industry, because it was other volunteers that helped me and brought me up and kind of pulled me in, rolled me into the fold, and allowed me to help others and showed me the value of sharing my knowledge, my skills, my abilities with other people. Same thing. Avoid these certain pitfalls, or, having somebody to call when you run into an issue, or, whether it's codes, specs, testing, welding, like anything. Like I've got an entire Rolodex of other volunteers that I can reach out to, and I know they're going to answer because they like helping people just as much as I do. And that's why when I get phone calls and emails and DMs and all that stuff, I reach back out and I respond and, try to help somebody else out, because I know that now they have that knowledge. They're going to be able to pass that off to, somebody else that's going to need that, because they're going to be, eventually they're going to become really proficient in that area, and they'll be able to share their experience.
And it kind of, I think you're kind of hinting about the fact that the welding community is a family. Huge. And I just thought it was this enormous, there's so many directions you can go in welding. And I thought, oh man, it's so hard. And I'm not pulling the girl card, but getting into the welding industry for me was challenging, because, you got people like, oh, did you get into this because of your husband? And I said, no, but I've taught him how to weld and he's pretty good at it now, but like people always just assume that you don't know anything at the beginning. You have to prove yourself, and then you have to prove yourself again and prove yourself again. And eventually people calm down and they're like, oh, she's not going anywhere. All right. Yeah, we're going to give her a chance. But then you're part of this family. I mean, for skills, for example, welding sculpture and welding fabrication in Atlanta are next to each other. It's the first time, well, when we moved to Atlanta a few years ago, that was the first time that all 3 welding contests were right next to each other. We are able to show people the art side, the fabrication side, and then the qualification type side. It's awesome. And we operate as a family. And, you don't have to agree with everybody. And that's okay too, because families do that. You don't always agree, but you listen to them. And then you stick up for each other. Like I forgot to order gases. We introduced in welding sculpture last year, we introduced live welding. They don't make their sculptures on our site, but they prepare them ahead of time. But we have live welding just to kind of, prove that they know what they're doing. Well, I forgot to order the gases. That's okay. Welding did. They ordered them for me just in case I forgot. it was the first time I was doing live welding. So I know how to order gases. I have them in my shop, but like, there's a lot going on when you add a live component. And so we look out for each other. And I think that sense of family has really helped me whenever I question, gosh, is this the right thing? Or, anytime I might have felt like out of place, I'm like, I'm part of a family. I mean, even I'm seeing some of the names that are popping up and I'm like, oh, these guys encourage me on Instagram. Like, I've never met some of them in my life. I hope I do. There's AZ Mike. I know you're looking, and I know you're watching. Like, he is probably one of our biggest fans, and he's an amazing welder. And I want to do a project with him. Like, but it's a family. I don't even know everybody in person yet.
Yeah, no, and that's the cool thing is we all give each other a little bit of flack online. Whether you're a MIG welder or a TIG welder, or even inspection, whether you're a pipe, API or ASME or D11 or whatever the case. But when we all get to these seminars or conferences or FabTech's like the big family reunion of the year. We all get along. We all buy each other a drink. We all have a good time, and we rib on each other a little bit. But at the end of the day, it is like a family. It's a very supportive community, and the cool thing is everybody wants to see you succeed. So, and it's I think that dynamic has shifted quite a bit since when I was coming up. You had a lot of people that they didn't want to see you succeed. They didn't want to see somebody doing better than them. And I think that entire dynamic, for some reason, just kind of naturally shifted to, hey, I see you're struggling over there. Let me give you a hand, or let me show you something I learned coming up because it wasn't easy for me. So I don't know what that is, but it's become more of a community, more of a family. And it's an awesome skill set. It's an awesome trade, and it's great to give back to other people that want to learn, or they just want a little bit more information about it. I get people that come by the shop all the time. They're like, I just want to know what this stuff's all about. Like I've always been curious. Like, can I try it? Yeah, sure. Let's go. Grab a hood, grab a jacket. Here's the safety stuff. Boom. Let's get into it.
Yep, exactly. I was just talking to Meraki Metalworks. She's out of Bakersfield, California. She's only been in the welding industry for 1 year, and she said she's killing it. She said, I've never been so welcomed in my entire life. She had a different career path, and she's like, everyone in the welding industry just embraces me and tries to help me. And I said, well, I'm glad that experience is for you. That's the way it is. For me, it was hard to break in, but once I was in, it was okay. And then I'm making sure that like, I'm bringing everybody on board. I'm like, oh yeah, come on, you'll learn. Like no one's judged. You're only going to be a bad welder for a certain amount of time, and then you're going to be great. You just keep practicing. But she's an example of how what you're talking about, where we've shifted, and now people really want to help each other. I say it this way: my ability to weld or inability to weld does not impact your ability or inability to weld. If I'm a good welder, that doesn't make you a bad welder. Why can't we both be good welders?
Yeah.
Why can't we both be good fabricators? And so I think once you eliminate that competitive slice, then, you've got a playing field that we all have space. We all have space at the table.
Yeah. Let's bring each other up. And you're right. Allison, she's just an awesome person. I got to meet her at FabTech last year, and she's awesome personality. The artwork she's doing, it's great. And she comes from a very different background. I mean, she was a litigation attorney for, several years, and then got into welding and decided to take that leap of faith. And she's in a position in her life right now where she can do that. But it's really cool because she started reaching out and connecting with different people, and everybody's willing to help her. Like it seems like everybody kind of, if you get involved, the community just surrounds you. They want to help you. They want to bring you up.
It's the law of attraction. You get out of the universe what you put into it. And, someone like her, she wants to give back. She wants to gain a skill set, and then she's looking to give back. Like, that's part of her mission. And I think that's so cool. She's going into it with the right attitude. Of course you want to help her.
Yeah. She's a great person. I think she just recently linked up with Uniweld also, because she was down here in Florida. She did like an event down here with them.
Good. Yeah. I'm thinking I got to figure out a way to connect with people, hopefully in person, where we can do like a joint build, do something in different communities, and get kids involved. And I like the idea of doing like a river dredge, all the metal that you find in the river and making some sculptures out of that. Those are always fun things to do. But I want to, kind of maybe at some point go on like a little tour and like just partner with all the cool people I've met through welding, but but through social media.
That'd be kind of cool. Just get like a big flatbed and just kind of go around the country and let everybody just kind of build a massive sculpture.
Exactly. Or, build one in each community, and you can leave it in the community. But maybe it's something useful or something helpful or something that would help them symbolize something.
Yeah,
Something meaningful to the people in the community.
Yeah, that'd be neat. And I mean, you'd be the person to do it too, because I mean, you're out there building all kinds of sculptures for your area and stuff.
Yeah, that was not an expectation. My sister was the artist growing up. I was the scientist. And so we were doing a 5K race a couple years ago, and she said, "Did you ever think?" Because I'm a runner. My husband and I have done a marathon on all 7 continents.
Oh,
so I know, right? Crazy. Like, who even does that? But so we're running. I'm running with my sister, who was not a runner. And she goes, "Did you ever think that you would be running next to me at a 5K?" And I said, "No." And she goes, "Did you ever think you'd have sculptures on Main Street?" And I was like, "Heck no." But roles can reverse. So yeah, the first time someone like, "Oh, that's the artist that did that," I went, and I'm looking for like, where's the art? Oh God, really? You were calling me that? It's terrifying.
Now you're the artist.
Fabrication's not terrifying. It's go, no go, or but art it's interpretive, and that's challenging.
Yeah, and I think art's bringing a lot more people into the welding industry. Definitely. I mean, there's so many different people that they've got that artistic skill set. They just got to figure out how to work with the medium.
Well, and I've learned so much about other forms of art. I took a quilting class years ago when I lived in Iowa, and I really didn't understand that a 1/16 error on one side would be like an 1.5 inch error on the other side of the quilt, because I hadn't fabricated anything really, and then I break it down. Now I understand fabrication. The original fabrication was clothing, making coverings for you. And so like Perrette, who is a big part of the American Welding Society, Perrette Gorman, she was a tailor prior to being a welding engineer. And when she said that, I was like, "Oh, that makes total sense." She's like, "You're the first person that's ever gotten that." I was like, "Well, you're building, you're just using a different material." And so literally material. I know, right? It's fabrication. So when I made this 250-pound Mario sculpture out of 3-inch cubes, I realized I made the same mistake that I made in that quilting class years ago. A 1/16 error on one side translates to this crazy wonky thing on the other side. I had hoped to build like different pieces and shift them, put them together. That is not happening. You have to build that literally from the ground up, one layer at a time. But I needed to learn that lesson, because I will never make that mistake again. And it made me a better fabricator. But it also made me appreciate quilting a whole lot more, because anyone who thinks that quilting is for sissies, then you should try it. I mean, it is real. It's fabrication. It's just maybe lightweight material, but yeah, but other mediums, like I feel like I can appreciate them better because some of the mistakes that I've made, and other forms of art that I don't know. I feel like my eyes are open. Like, I've always appreciated art, but I feel like I now understand the work that has gone into things on a deeper level.
No, and it's cool to work with different mediums, but I like what you said about making mistakes. You're going to learn more from your mistakes than you will anything else. And a lot of it translates. Like you said, you messed up a 1/16 of an inch on fabric, and you're 1.5 inches off over here. It all compounds no matter what material you're working with. Even woodworking. Like, I got into woodworking for a little bit, and like I'll make that up over here down the line. And no, it just compounds throughout the entire piece.
Mm-mm. You have more patience than I do if you're a woodworker. Yeah, we screw up badly enough in welding. You just weld it back on, grind it down, and nobody has to know. All you've done is wasted some hours. That's it. I feel like that the opportunity for failure is probably equal in both woodworking and metalworking, but the opportunity to cover your butt is significantly better in welding.
Yeah, depending on how bad the screw up is. Like, I've lost corners of boards and stuff like that. You'd be surprised what you could do with a bit of sawdust and some wood glue, and it's like a perfect match.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely not. I don't know that I yet have the patience to be a woodworker, but But, you know, I mean, like behind me, you know, doing artsy stuff like that, like Dr. Seussian kinds of styles, what you can do with metal is say, I meant to do that. That was a feature, not a mistake.
I like that. Happy little accidents, a little Bob Ross action in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. We have a class that's the Bob Ross theme class. It's Happy Little Trees. And we play Bob Ross in the background and, you know, his very soothing voice and just make a happy little tree. And whatever happens, whatever looks wrong is not wrong. It is a happy accident. You know, it was meant to be.
Fun fact about Bob Ross, he never sold any of his artwork, or he never took any of the money from selling his artwork. He donated it all to PBS. He made all of his money off of the art supplies that he sold.
Huh. I did not know that.
And
Thank you.
I think he's buried in Florida. I'm just not sure where. I think Clearwater area. I probably got that one wrong. But yeah, the whole thing, like he just donated all of his works to PBS to, you know, help fund the station and stuff.
That doesn't surprise me. You know, he and Mr. Rogers, man, they're bomb.
Yeah. Miss those guys.
Yeah. Yes, I know. You know, we've often at, you know, parties talked about, you know, who are 3 people you'd go out to lunch with or whatever. And, you know, I feel like Mr. Rogers for sure, probably Jim Henson, who's a genius, and then probably Dr. Seuss. You know, Bob Ross would be like the 4th one if I was going to go in that order. But just because they were so innovative in their thinking, they colored outside the lines big time and changed the face of our world as we know it, you know, in different ways. But I just feel like, man, they were game changers.
Especially Dr. Seuss.
Yeah. I've done a couple of pieces with some of my my charter high school students. We did a 13-foot gate, and it kind of has the theme of this tree behind me. And we did everything in the inverse. That way the draw side was out so we could have the texture. And when we, I don't know if you can kind of tell where there's some connections there. When we, on a large scale, you're going to have a big gap in between. And so I said, okay, well, what would Dr. Seuss do to connect these pieces? And so we've got inchworms and butterflies and all kinds of animals all over, spiders and things like to connect the pieces. And the couple that we made it for loved it. They're both artists. And so, you know, kind of putting yourself in that space where, you know, if you're kind of going along with the Dr. Seuss theme, what would work in Dr. Seuss's world? And so, you know, not having a limit, not like, oh, this has to be fabricated in a particular way.
That's my hard part, is like breaking away from being square and level all the time. It's got to be square, got to be level, got to be plumb.
Yeah, I think I kind of ebb and flow in that. But I have a pretty good eye. I can tell when like a picture, when I hang a picture, I don't have to use a level. I usually got that. But the squared up thing, I have to do a lot of just breathe through it. If it's not square, does it have to be? I mean, does it really have to be? Just let it go.
Yeah. It's a good lesson to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Well, awesome.
Well, especially when you're working with kids.
Yeah. Well, Shanen, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming out and sharing your story to kick off National Welding Month here on Weld Wednesdays with AWS.
Thank you so much, Jason, for having me. I know you know it. AWS is a huge part of my journey. It started with skills and then AWS. And I feel like every opportunity that we have to encourage kids to join AWS. I'm on the membership committee. So yay, students don't have to pay for membership anymore.
Yep. Now student membership.
You know, those kinds of things. Yeah. And I'm like, just get out there and do it, because AWS is so important, and welding and building is so important. And like you said, even if you don't do it for a career, it's name something. Here, this is the challenge I always give people. Name something that you have touched today that has not been welded or been manufactured by a machine that was welded.
Can't.
Exactly. So thank you so much. I'm grateful that I got to be the first one this month, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the series.
Thank you. You guys have an awesome night. Thank you all for coming out.